George Washington had false teeth but not made of wood. When you picture George Washington, what comes to mind? The stoic face on the dollar bill? The legendary general crossing the Delaware? Or the first president setting the precedent for a new nation? He's a titan of history, a man carved in marble, seemingly perfect and unshakable. We see him in portraits, calm and composed, a symbol of strength and leadership. But what if I told you that behind that firm, determined expression, the man we call the father of our country was hiding a secret? A deeply personal and painful struggle that plagued him for most of his adult life. This isn't a story of battlefields or political debates. It's a story that takes place not in the halls of power but inside his own mouth. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of myth and legend to uncover the very human and very relatable story of George Washington and his teeth. It's a tale of constant pain, revolutionary dentistry, and the surprising truth behind one of history's most famous smiles or lack thereof. Let's travel back to the 18th century. Long before modern dentistry, taking care of your teeth was a brutal affair. There were no gentle cleanings or painless fillings. Washington, like many of his time, suffered from dental problems from a young age. He wasn't even 30 years old when he had his first tooth pulled. Imagine being the commander of the Continental Army, trying to inspire your troops and outmaneuver the British, all while dealing with excruciating toothaches, inflamed gums, and the constant discomfort of a deteriorating mouth. His diaries and letters are filled with references to his dental woes. He writes about aching teeth, visits from dentists, and orders for special tools like tooth scrapers and files. He tried all sorts of remedies, from rinsing with tinctures to using various powders, but nothing seemed to stop the inevitable decay. By the time he was sworn in as the first president of the United States in 1789, he had only one single, lonely natural tooth left in his entire head. Think about that. The man delivering that historic inaugural address was doing so with a mouth that was almost completely empty. This brings us to one of the most persistent myths about Washington, his wooden teeth. We've all heard the stories, right? The image of our first president chomping down with a set of clunky wooden dentures is practically an American legend. But here's the thing, it's completely false. George Washington never had wooden teeth. It's a fascinating piece of folklore, but the reality is far more complex and, frankly, much more gruesome. So if they weren't wood, what were his dentures actually made of? Prepare yourself, because the answer reveals the desperate and often stomach-turning state of 18th century dentistry. His dentures were masterpieces of their time, but they were crafted from a bizarre and unsettling combination of materials. We're talking about a base of lead or carved hippopotamus ivory, fitted with springs made of gold, and, for the teeth themselves, a mix of human teeth, cow teeth, and horse teeth, all painstakingly filed down and held in place by brass screws and wires. He owned several sets of these dentures throughout his life, each one custom-made by the leading dentists of his day, like the famous Dr. John Greenwood. These contraptions were uncomfortable, ill-fitting, and often caused his face to look puffy or distorted. The springs that were meant to hold them in place would push them apart, forcing him to constantly clench his jaw to keep his mouth shut. This is partly why he looks so stern and grim in his later portraits. It wasn't just a serious demeanor. He was physically struggling to keep his teeth from popping out of his mouth. One of his most famous sets of dentures, which you can still see today, was anchored to his one remaining natural tooth. Can you imagine the pressure and pain that single, overworked tooth must have been under? The ivory base was also prone to staining, absorbing the flavors of his food and wine, which would have made them look discolored and unpleasant, perhaps contributing to the wooden myth. But where did the human teeth in his dentures come from? This is where the story takes an even darker turn. The demand for human teeth for dentures was high, and the sources were grim. They were often purchased from the poor, who would sell their teeth for cash, or even extracted from the bodies of fallen soldiers on the battlefield. Most disturbingly, historical records show that Washington purchased teeth from enslaved individuals at his Mount Vernon estate. In his own account books from 1784, there's an entry for paying Negroes for 9 teeth. It's a sobering and uncomfortable fact that the very dentures that allowed the Father of Liberty to speak were constructed in part from the bodies of people he held in bondage. This inconvenient truth adds a deeply troubling layer to his personal struggle, connecting his private pain to the great moral contradiction of his public life. Washington's dental problems didn't just cause him physical pain. They profoundly affected his confidence and his public persona. He was intensely self-conscious about his appearance and how he spoke. The poorly fitting dentures pushed out his lips and changed the shape of his face. His second inaugural address was the shortest in American history, just 135 words. Was this because of his failing health, or was it also because speaking for any length of time was a difficult and painful ordeal? He constantly sent his dentures back to his dentist for adjustments, complaining that they were uneasy in the mouth or that they made his lips bulge. In one letter, he desperately asked his dentist to make a new set that wouldn't look so artificial. He was a man who commanded armies and built a nation, yet he was humbled by this intensely personal and relentless struggle. It's a powerful reminder that even the most monumental figures in history are still, at their core, human beings with human frailties. The story of George Washington's teeth humanizes him in a way that tales of his heroism cannot. It transforms him from a remote, godlike figure into someone we can almost understand on a personal level. We've all felt the misery of a toothache or the insecurity of a less-than-perfect smile. His struggle reminds us that behind every great historical portrait, there is a real person with real problems. He wasn't a marble statue. He was a man who endured incredible pain with quiet fortitude, all while shaping the course of a new country. His perseverance in the face of this chronic ailment is, in its own way, as testament to his character as any victory on the battlefield. So the next time you pull a dollar bill from your wallet and see that familiar, somber face, take a closer look. Remember the man behind the portrait, a man who led a revolution not just against a king, but against the constant, agonizing pain inside his own mouth. It's a story of suffering, innovation, and a secret that was, quite literally, hidden right behind his lips. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a little-known chapter of American history. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Let me know in the comments what other historical myths you'd like me to uncover. Until next time, stay curious. You've probably heard it a million times. Maybe in history class or from a trivia-loving uncle. George Washington, the first president of the United States, had wooden teeth. It's one of those classic fun facts that everyone seems to know. It paints a picture, doesn't it? The stoic founding father with a clunky, splintery smile. This image has been etched into our collective memory, passed down through generations, appearing in textbooks, cartoons, and countless school reports. It's a story that has become as much a part of American folklore as the cherry tree. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself, was it ever actually true? The myth of Washington's wooden teeth is surprisingly old, almost as old as the dentures themselves. It seems to have taken root sometime in the early 19th century, not long after Washington's death. So how did a simple misunderstanding spiral into a nationwide legend? Well, part of the blame lies with early biographers. In their attempts to make Washington a relatable, almost mythic figure, they often embellished stories. The idea of him enduring the discomfort of wooden teeth added to his image of stoic resilience. He could lead a revolution, found a nation, and do it all while dealing with a mouthful of splinters. It was a compelling narrative. This story found fertile ground in a society that loved tall tales and larger-than-life heroes. It was simple, memorable, and just a little bit gross, the perfect recipe for a story that sticks. From there, it was a short leap into schoolbooks. For much of the 19th and 20th centuries, history education often prioritized moral lessons and memorable anecdotes over strict factual accuracy. Washington had wooden teeth was an easy fact for a child to remember, and it served to humanize an otherwise intimidating historical figure. Generations of students learned it, accepted it as gospel, and then grew up to teach it to their own children. The myth became self-perpetuating, a piece of historical, common knowledge that few people ever thought to question. So let's finally put this myth to rest. The truth is, George Washington never had wooden teeth, not a single pair. Modern forensic analysis of his surviving dentures, and yes, we still have them, proves this definitively. So what were they actually made of? The reality is far more complex and frankly much more fascinating than the simple myth of wood. Washington's dental problems were severe and plagued him for most of his adult life. He lost his first tooth in his early 20s, and by the time he became president in 1789, he had only one single natural tooth left. To combat this, he commissioned multiple sets of dentures throughout his life, each one a marvel of 18th century dental technology. Custom-made by the best dentists of his time, like Dr. John Greenwood. These weren't crude wooden blocks. They were sophisticated devices crafted from a variety of materials. The base plates, which held the teeth, were often carved from hippopotamus ivory or elephant ivory. These materials were chosen for their durability and ability to be shaped to fit the gums. Now, over time, ivory, being porous, would absorb stains from food and drink like tea, coffee, and wine. This staining could give the dentures a brownish, grainy appearance, which might, to an untrained eye, look a lot like wood grain. This is likely the origin of the whole wooden teeth misunderstanding. Someone saw a stained, discolored set of ivory dentures and made a simple but incorrect assumption. But what about the teeth themselves? They weren't wood either. They were a grim assortment of materials that tell a dark story about the era. Many of Washington's dentures were fitted with real human teeth. These were purchased, often from the poor who sold their teeth for cash, or even extracted from the bodies of deceased individuals. In a letter to his dentist, Washington even inquired about obtaining teeth, showing how common this practice was. It's a macabre thought, but it was the reality of 18th century dentistry. In addition to human teeth, some of his dentures also incorporated teeth from animals, like horses and donkeys. These various teeth were held in place on the ivory baseplate by gold wire springs and brass screws. The combination of ivory, gold, brass, and an assortment of human and animal teeth made for a heavy, uncomfortable, and often painful apparatus. The discomfort was immense. The springs that held the upper and lower plates together were stiff and required constant clenching to keep the dentures in his mouth. This is believed to be the reason for his famously stern, tight-lipped expression in many portraits. He wasn't just being serious. He was struggling to keep his teeth from falling out. Letters to his dentist are filled with complaints about the fit, the pain, and how they distorted the shape of his face. In one letter, he lamented how his dentures made his lips bulge unnaturally. Far from being a simple, rustic solution, Washington's dental woes were a constant source of pain and self-consciousness. Let's take a look at his only surviving full set of dentures, which is now housed at the Mount Vernon estate. This set, made for him in 1789, the year he became president, is a testament to this incredible craftsmanship and its grim reality. The base is hippopotamus ivory, carefully carved to fit his gums. The upper denture holds ivory teeth, while the lower one has 8 human teeth, which are thought to have been purchased from enslaved people at Mount Vernon. They are held together by gold springs. It is a powerful and unsettling artifact. It dispels the myth of wooden teeth, but replaces it with a more complex truth about wealth, inequality, and the rudimentary state of medicine in the 18th century. So why does the wooden teeth myth persist, even when the evidence against it is so overwhelming? I think it's because the myth serves a purpose. It's simpler and less disturbing than the truth. A story about wooden teeth is quaint, a bit funny even. A story about wearing teeth pulled from the mouths of the poor and the dead is, well, it's a lot darker. It forces us to confront uncomfortable realities about the past. The myth sanitizes history, making it more palatable. But in doing so, we lose a fascinating and important part of the story. The real story of Washington's teeth reveals so much more about the man himself, his personal struggles, his perseverance in the face of constant pain, and about the world he lived in. It's a story of incredible technological innovation mixed with grim, unsettling practices. It's a story of wealth and desperation, of science and suffering. Next time you hear someone mention George Washington's wooden teeth, you can now set the record straight. The truth is not only more accurate, but it's also infinitely more compelling. It reminds us that historical figures were real people who faced real and often painful challenges. The story of Washington's teeth isn't one of wood and splinters, but of ivory and gold, of human struggle and scientific endeavor. And that's a story far more worthy of being told. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of America's most enduring myths. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Let me know in the comments what other historical myths you'd like me to tackle next. See you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're stepping back in time to uncover a very human and often painful side of one of America's most iconic figures, George Washington. We all know the portraits, the stoic gaze, the strong jawline. But behind that famous image was a man who endured nearly a lifetime of excruciating dental problems. This isn't just a historical footnote. It's a story of resilience, 18th century medicine, and the private suffering of a public giant. Let's rewind to Washington as a young man. Long before he was a general or a president, he was a robust, athletic Virginian. He stood over 6 feet tall, was an accomplished horseman, and had a reputation for physical strength. But beneath this vigorous exterior, a battle was already beginning inside his own mouth. His dental troubles started not in his old age, but in his early 20s. Imagine being a young, ambitious surveyor, making your way in the world, but constantly being plagued by throbbing toothaches. The first documented evidence of his dental woes appears in his diaries and letters. As early as 1756, when he was just 24 years old, he recorded paying a Dr. Watson for a dental procedure. This wasn't a one-time visit. Throughout his 20s and 30s, his writings are peppered with mentions of toothache, swelling, and payments to various dentists and surgeons. These weren't minor complaints. They were debilitating episodes that could lay him up for days. So, what was causing all this pain? It was likely a perfect storm of factors. First, let's consider the dental hygiene of the 18th century, or rather the lack thereof. While Washington was known to be meticulous about his appearance, the tools and knowledge we take for granted today simply didn't exist. Toothbrushes were rudimentary, often made from hog bristles, and toothpaste was a homemade concoction of things like chalk, salt, or even abrasive brick dust. These practices could do more harm than good, wearing down enamel and leading to decay. Then there was the diet. While the upper class had access to a variety of foods, sugar was becoming increasingly popular. Sugary treats, combined with a lack of effective cleaning, created a breeding ground for bacteria, leading to cavities, gum disease, and abscesses. An infection in one tooth could easily spread, creating a cascade of problems that would follow Washington for the rest of his life. We also can't rule out genetics. Some people are simply more predisposed to dental issues, and Washington may have been one of them. Whatever the precise cause, the result was a cycle of pain, infection, and extraction. By the time he took command of the Continental Army in 1775, he was already fighting a war on two fronts, one against the British, and a deeply personal one against his own deteriorating teeth. Think about the immense pressure he was under, leading a fledgling army against the most powerful military force on Earth. Now, add to that the constant nagging agony of a severe toothache. His letters from this period give us a raw, unfiltered glimpse into his suffering. He wrote to his cousin, Lund Washington, mentioning his aching teeth and the swelling that often accompanied the pain. These weren't just passing remarks. They were pleas for relief from a man trying to hold a nation together while his own body felt like it was falling apart. The standard treatment for a problematic tooth back then was simple and brutal: extraction. And these procedures were nothing like the sterile, anesthetized process we know today. They were performed by blacksmiths, barbers, or surgeons using crude iron tools called pelicans or pelicans. There was no anesthetic, just maybe a stiff drink of whiskey to dull the senses. The risk of splintering the jawbone or causing a massive infection was incredibly high. Each extraction was a traumatic event, and Washington endured many of them. He lost his first adult tooth in his early 20s, and from there, it was a steady decline. He meticulously saved the teeth that were extracted, a common practice at the time, perhaps with the hope they could be re-implanted or used in dentures later on. By the time he was inaugurated as the first president of the United States in 1789, at the age of 57, he had only one single natural tooth left in his head. Just one. This single remaining tooth, a lower left bicuspid, became incredibly precious. His primary dentist, Dr. John Greenwood, designed Washington's famous dentures to fit around it, hoping to keep it stable. But eventually, even that last holdout had to be pulled in 1796. Washington was so attached to it that he allowed Dr. Greenwood to keep it. And it's now preserved at the New York Academy of Medicine, a tiny, tangible link to the man's long and painful dental journey. Now, let's talk about those dentures. This is where one of the most persistent myths about Washington comes into play: the wooden teeth. Let me be clear, George Washington did not have wooden teeth. This myth probably started because some of his dentures, made from ivory, became stained over time, giving them a grainy, wood-like appearance. But they were never made of wood. Wood is porous and would have splintered and rotted in the mouth, making it completely unsuitable for dentures. So what were they made of? Washington owned several sets of dentures throughout his life, and they were marvels of 18th century craftsmanship, yet also instruments of torture. They were constructed from a bizarre and frankly unsettling collection of materials. The base plates were often carved from hippopotamus ivory or lead. The teeth themselves were a combination of human teeth, horse teeth, and donkey teeth, all filed down and held in place on the ivory base with metal pivots and powerful steel springs. Imagine wearing that device. The springs were necessary to force the upper and lower plates apart, essentially clamping them against his gums. This created constant pressure and discomfort. They were heavy, ill-fitting, and made it incredibly difficult to speak or eat naturally. The human teeth used in the dentures were often purchased from other people, including, disturbingly, from his own enslaved workers. Records show payments made to enslaved individuals at Mount Vernon for their teeth. This is a deeply uncomfortable truth that highlights the complex and often dark realities of the time. These dentures profoundly affected Washington's public and private life. They distorted the shape of his face, causing his lips to bulge and his jaw to look strained. If you look closely at portraits painted later in his life, particularly Gilbert Stuart's famous unfinished portrait, you can see the awkwardness and tension around his mouth. That's not a natural expression. It's the look of a man struggling to keep a bulky, painful apparatus in place. The discomfort was constant. His letters to Dr. Greenwood are filled with complaints about the fit, requests for adjustments, and detailed instructions on how to file them down or clean them. He often had to send his dentures back and forth through the mail for repairs. He wrote about how they turned black from port wine and needed constant scraping and cleaning. He was so self-conscious about them that he rarely smiled in public, contributing to his image as a stern, reserved leader. This stoicism wasn't just his personality. It was, in part, a coping mechanism for his physical discomfort and insecurity. This lifelong struggle offers a powerful lesson in empathy. It's easy to see historical figures as marble statues, but they were real people with real problems. Washington's dental pain didn't stop him from leading a revolution, shaping a new government, and setting the standard for the American presidency. He endured this chronic pain with a level of fortitude that is truly astonishing. He managed armies, debated policy, and hosted state dinners, all while dealing with a condition that would send most of us straight to bed. His story is a testament to his incredible resilience, but it also serves as a stark reminder of how far medical and dental science has come. The simple act of brushing your teeth with fluoride toothpaste or getting a painless filling is a luxury Washington could only have dreamed of. His painful journey underscores the importance of the dental care we often take for granted today. So the next time you see a portrait of George Washington, look beyond the powdered wig and the formal attire. Remember the man behind the myth, a man who, despite constant, debilitating pain, never wavered in his duty. His struggle with his teeth doesn't diminish his legacy. It makes his accomplishments all the more remarkable. It paints a picture of a leader who was not just politically strong, but personally, profoundly, and painfully human. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a lesser-known chapter of American history. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that bring the past to life. Let us know in the comments what you think, or if there are other historical figures you'd like to learn more about. We'll see you in the next video. Ever had a toothache? You pop a painkiller, call your dentist, maybe get a filling or a root canal with plenty of anesthetic. Now imagine that same toothache. But it's the 1700s. Welcome to the world of colonial American medicine, a place where a toothache could be a life-altering event. Let's set the scene. You're living in a bustling town like Philadelphia or Boston. There are no dedicated dental schools, no concept of fluoride, and the understanding of what causes cavities is, to put it mildly, fuzzy. Your dentist might be the local blacksmith, the town barber, or even a silversmith who dabbles in making false teeth. These individuals were craftsmen, not medical professionals as we know them. Their primary tool for a bad tooth wasn't a drill. It was a pair of pliers or a terrifying-looking instrument called a tooth key. The goal wasn't to save the tooth. It was to get it out, and there was no anesthetic, no Novocaine, no laughing gas. Maybe you'd get a stiff drink of whiskey or rum to brace yourself, but that was it. The procedure was brutal, public, and incredibly painful. A crowd might even gather to watch the spectacle. You'd be held down in a chair while the practitioner worked, and the risk of infection, a broken jaw, or damage to surrounding teeth was sky-high. This was the raw, gritty reality of healthcare. This stark reality stands in fascinating contrast to the refined public image of the era's leading figures, like George Washington. We see portraits of him looking stoic and stately, the very picture of composure. But behind that dignified facade was a man who endured a lifetime of dental agony. His story is a powerful window into the medical world of the 18th century. Washington started losing his teeth in his early 20s. By the time he became president, he had only one of his own teeth left. This wasn't just a cosmetic issue. It was a source of constant pain and discomfort. It affected how he spoke, how he ate, and likely how he felt every single day. He was constantly writing to dentists, seeking relief and better-fitting dentures. And let's talk about those dentures. Forget the myth about wooden teeth. Washington's dentures were state-of-the-art for the time, but that isn't saying much. They were crafted from a combination of human teeth likely purchased from poor individuals, or scavenged along with teeth from animals like horses and donkeys, all set in a base of carved hippopotamus ivory or lead. These contraptions were heavy, ill-fitting, and held in place by powerful steel springs that pushed against his cheeks. Imagine trying to deliver a presidential address with that in your mouth. The springs would often force his mouth open, contributing to his famously grim and tight-lipped expression in portraits. The letters he wrote reveal his frustration. He complained about the dentures discoloring, fitting poorly, and causing him pain. He was constantly sending them back for adjustments. This personal struggle of a national hero humanizes him and highlights the universal experience of suffering, regardless of status. His wealth and position gave him access to the best care available, but the best was still shockingly primitive by our standards. This wasn't just about teeth. The broader medical landscape was a minefield of theories and treatments that seem bizarre today. The dominant theory was that of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness was believed to be caused by an imbalance of these fluids. So, what was the cure? To rebalance them, of course. This led to the widespread practice of bloodletting. If you had a fever, an infection, or pretty much any ailment, the go-to treatment was to drain some of your blood. Doctors, or barber surgeons, would use a lancet to open a vein or apply leeches. The idea was that removing the excess or bad blood would restore balance and health. In reality, it often weakened the patient further, leading to shock, anemia, or even death. It's a chilling thought that the prescribed cure was often more dangerous than the disease itself. Another common treatment was purging. Patients were given powerful laxatives and emetics made from substances like mercury or arsenic to induce vomiting and diarrhea. Again, the goal was to expel the bad humors from the body. You can imagine how debilitating this would be for someone already weakened by illness. Surgery was a last resort, and for good reason. Without an understanding of germ theory, surgical instruments weren't sterilized. Surgeons would move from one patient to the next with the same unwashed tools and hands. Post-operative infection was so common that it was often considered an inevitable part of the healing process, referred to as laudable pus. The mortality rate for even minor surgeries was staggeringly high. So, when we look back at the 18th century, we see this incredible paradox. It was the Age of Enlightenment, a time of brilliant philosophical, political, and scientific progress. Yet, the lived experience of the human body was one of constant vulnerability. The very people drafting constitutions and debating the rights of man were at the mercy of medical practices that were, at best, ineffective, and at worst, torturous. George Washington's dental troubles are more than just a historical footnote. They are a powerful symbol of this era. They remind us that behind the powdered wigs and formal portraits were real people dealing with real pain, navigating a world where a simple toothache could lead to a life of misery. It gives us a profound appreciation for the medical knowledge we so often take for granted today. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this glimpse into 18th century medicine fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what historical topic you'd like to explore next. See you in the next video. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today, we diving deep into a surprisingly intimate and humanizing aspect of one of history's most iconic figures, George Washington. We all know the stoic, serious face from the dollar bill, but have you ever wondered what was going on behind that tightly closed mouth? The story is more painful, more complex, and frankly, more fascinating than you might imagine. Forget the myth of wooden teeth. The reality is a lifelong struggle that shaped not just his appearance, but potentially his personality and even his leadership. Let's rewind to Washington's youth. You might picture the future general as a robust, healthy young man, and he was. But dental problems, a common scourge of the 18th century, began plaguing him early on. His detailed diaries and account books, which meticulously recorded everything from crop yields to military strategies, also paint a grim picture of his dental health. As early as his 20s, he was experiencing toothaches, gum inflammation, and the dreaded extractions. Think about it. This is an era without modern anesthetics, without proper antibiotics. Every procedure was a brutal, painful ordeal. By 1756, at just 24 years old, he recorded his first tooth extraction. It was the first domino to fall in a long and painful cascade. Over the next few decades, Washington's dental situation deteriorated dramatically. His letters are filled with complaints of aching teeth and requests to dentists for tools like scrapers to clean them. He was fighting a losing battle. The popular treatments of the time often did more harm than good. For example, calomel, a mercury-based compound used to treat diseases like smallpox, was known to have severe side effects, including the loosening of teeth. Washington endured several serious illnesses throughout his life, and it's highly likely that the cures contributed to his dental woes. Imagine being the commander of the Continental Army, trying to lead a revolution, all while dealing with constant, throbbing pain in your mouth. It adds a whole new layer of respect for his resilience. By the time he was elected the first president of the United States in 1789, the man taking the oath of office had only one single natural tooth left in his head. Just one, let that sink in. At the pinnacle of his public life, he was in a state of near total dental collapse. This fact is crucial to understanding the man behind the monument. Those famous portraits by Gilbert Stuart where Washington looks so stern and reserved? Part of that expression was likely a conscious effort to keep his ill-fitting dentures from slipping or clacking. He was in constant discomfort. His dentures were not made of wood, as the popular myth goes. That's a misconception. They were crafted from a variety of materials including hippopotamus ivory, cow teeth, and even human teeth, all held together by a metal framework. These early dentures were marvels of 18th century technology, but they were also bulky, uncomfortable, and often painful. The ivory would stain and decay, causing terrible breath. The springs that held them in place would push against his gums and often forced his lips into an unnatural-looking bulge. In his letters to his dentist, Dr. John Greenwood, Washington frequently complained about the fit, the pain, and the way they distorted his face. He'd send them back and forth for adjustments, a constant source of frustration. He wrote about how they made it difficult for him to speak clearly. Think about that, a man who had to give public addresses, from his inaugural speech to his farewell address, struggled to articulate his words because of the contraption in his mouth. This constant nagging pain and self-consciousness almost certainly had a profound psychological effect. It helps explain his famously reserved and stoic demeanor. He wasn't necessarily unfriendly or aloof by nature. He was likely managing chronic discomfort. Public dinners, a huge part of political life, would have been an ordeal. He had to be careful with every bite, concerned about his dentures breaking or becoming dislodged. He often ate soft foods and would cut his meals into tiny pieces. This physical limitation likely contributed to his reputation for being quiet and contemplative at social gatherings. He was a man carrying a hidden burden, one that literally reshaped his face and influenced his interactions with the world. Let's consider how this impacted his leadership. Washington was known for his incredible self-control and discipline. He had to be. Leading the Continental Army required immense fortitude, but managing his own physical suffering demanded a different, more personal kind of strength. He never let his pain become a public spectacle or an excuse. He compartmentalized it, pushing through discomfort to fulfill his duties to his country. This private battle, fought every single day, may have forged the iron will we so admire. When you look at that face on the dollar bill now, don't just see a president or a general. See a man who endured decades of physical suffering with quiet dignity. The story of Washington's teeth isn't just a quirky historical footnote. It's a window into his humanity. It strips away the marble facade of the monument and reveals a person who dealt with pain, frustration, and vulnerability, just like any of us. His dentures were not a sign of weakness, but a testament to his determination to function and lead despite his physical challenges. He was constantly seeking better solutions, engaging with the best dental practitioners of his day, trying to overcome a problem that plagued him his entire adult life. It's a deeply human story of resilience in the face of relentless adversity. It makes his accomplishments, leading a revolution, founding a nation, all the more remarkable. He wasn't a superhero. He was a man who persevered. So the next time you see a portrait of George Washington, look closer. Look at his mouth, his jaw, the set of his expression. Remember the constant pain he was in, the uncomfortable dentures he wore, and the single, lonely tooth he had left when he became president. It transforms him from a distant, two-dimensional figure into a living, breathing person who faced his private struggles with the same fortitude he showed on the battlefield and in the presidency. It is a powerful reminder that even the greatest figures in history have their own hidden battles to fight. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into a lesser-known part of American history. I hope it gave you a new perspective on this founding father. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more stories that bring history to life. Let me know in the comments what you think. Did you know about Washington's dental struggles? We'll see you in the next video. Hello, history buffs, and welcome back to our deep dive into the everyday life of historical figures. In our last chapter, we started to unravel the myth of George Washington's wooden teeth. Today in Chapter 6, we're going to get up close and personal with the real materials that made up his famous smile: ivory, gold, and yes, human teeth. Let's separate the facts from the fiction and get to the truth behind the teeth. So, if Washington didn't have wooden teeth, what did he have? The answer is far more complex and frankly more fascinating. His surviving dentures, which you can still see in museums today, were masterpieces of 18th century dental technology. But they were a far cry from the comfortable, natural-looking prosthetics we have now. These were bulky, often painful contraptions held together by springs and wires. Let's start with the base. The plates of Washington's dentures, the part that would fit against his gums, were most commonly carved from ivory. Now when we say ivory, don't just think of elephants. While elephant ivory was used, hippopotamus ivory was actually the preferred material for dentistry at the time. Why? Because it's denser and less prone to staining than elephant ivory. Imagine a skilled artisan, essentially a sculptor, painstakingly carving a block of hippo tusk to match the contours of a person's mouth. It was an incredible feat of craftsmanship, but it had its downsides. Ivory is porous. Over time, it would absorb stains from food and drink, and it would start to decay, leading to a notoriously foul breath. This wasn't just a cosmetic issue. It was a constant source of discomfort and a battle against bad odors. To hold the upper and lower plates together, dentists used metal components. This is where the gold comes in. Gold wires and powerful steel springs were a critical part of the design. The springs were necessary because the dentures didn't have the suction fit we expect today. Instead, they were designed to constantly push apart, pressing the upper plate against the roof of the mouth and the lower plate onto the gums. Imagine having to constantly clench your jaw just to keep your teeth from popping out of your mouth. This made speaking and eating a real challenge. Washington's own letters and diaries are filled with complaints about his dentures. He wrote about them being ill-fitting and unwieldy. In one letter, he even asked his dentist to file them down because they were distorting the shape of his lips. The gold, while a sign of wealth and quality, was part of a mechanism that caused constant pressure and discomfort. Now we come to the most unsettling part of the story: the teeth themselves. The individual teeth set into the ivory base were often real human teeth. This might sound shocking to us, but in the 18th century, it was common practice. Where did these teeth come from? There were several sources. One was Waterloo teeth, teeth taken from fallen soldiers on the battlefield. Another source was grave robbing, a grim but very real part of the era's medical trade. But there's an even darker side to this practice that is directly connected to Washington himself. Financial records from his Mount Vernon plantation show payments made to enslaved people for their teeth. In one ledger from 1784, it's recorded that Washington paid several unnamed Negroes for a total of 9 teeth, which were then implanted into his dentures. It's a chilling and uncomfortable fact. These individuals were not in a position to give free and fair consent. They were selling parts of their bodies out of desperation under a system of brutal oppression. This detail adds a profound and troubling layer to the story, reminding us that the creation of this famous smile was built upon the suffering of others. The very teeth Washington used to address the nation were, in some cases, taken from people he held in bondage. So how did all these materials come together? A dentist like Dr. Jean-Pierre Lemaire, one of Washington's dentists, would start by taking a wax impression of the president's gums. This was a difficult process, especially since Washington only had one natural tooth left by the time he became president. Using this impression, the ivory plates would be carved. Then, tiny holes were drilled into the ivory base. The human teeth, or sometimes teeth carved from animal bone, were shaped at the root and then riveted into these holes using small gold pins. Finally, the steel springs were attached to connect the upper and lower dentures. The finished product was heavy, clunky, and required constant maintenance. They had to be removed and cleaned every night. Despite all this, they were the best technology available at the time. And for a public figure like Washington, having any kind of smile was better than having a mouth full of gaps. Let's take a moment to really consider the experience. Imagine putting this device in your mouth every morning. The feel of the hard porous ivory against your sore gums. The constant pressure from the steel springs forcing your jaw to work overtime. The knowledge that the teeth in your mouth once belonged to other people, some of whom were forced to part with them. It paints a picture of a man in constant low-grade pain. This context changes how we see him. When you look at those famous Gilbert Stuart portraits, with the stern, tightly clenched jaw, you're not just seeing a stoic leader. You're seeing a man struggling to keep his teeth in place. A man whose physical discomfort was a hidden part of his daily reality. The story of George Washington's teeth is so much more than a simple myth about wood. It's a story about technology, craftsmanship, and the harsh realities of life in the 18th century. It touches on wealth, status, and the brutal institution of slavery. By peeling back the layers of this myth, we gain a more human, more complex, and more honest understanding of the man himself. His struggle for a functioning smile reveals a vulnerability and a daily trial that is often lost in the grand narratives of his presidency and military leadership. It shows us that even the most powerful figures in history faced personal struggles that were both deeply human and inextricably linked to the social and ethical problems of their time. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter. I hope it's given you a new perspective on a well-known piece of history. What do you think? Does knowing the truth change how you see Washington? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter, where we'll explore the impact these dental woes had on his public speaking and personal life. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hello and welcome back. Today, we delve into a topic that requires our utmost care and sensitivity. It's a chapter in history that is often overlooked, one that sits uncomfortably alongside the grand narratives of liberty and revolution. We're going to discuss the story behind George Washington's dentures, specifically the deeply troubling fact that he purchased teeth from enslaved individuals. For a long time, the common myth was that Washington's false teeth were made of wood. This isn't true. His dentures were crafted from a variety of materials, including ivory, metal alloys, and most disturbingly, human teeth. But where did these teeth come from? This question leads us down a path that reveals a profound moral contradiction at the heart of America's founding story. While Washington was a towering figure in the fight for American independence, a leader who spoke eloquently about freedom and human rights, his personal life was deeply enmeshed in the institution of slavery. He was one of the largest enslavers in Virginia. This paradox becomes starkly clear when we examine his personal financial records. Ledgers and account books from Mount Vernon, Washington's plantation, provide chilling evidence. Entries from the 1780s detail payments made to enslaved people for their teeth. One entry from 1784, for example, records that Washington paid several unnamed Negroes for 9 of their teeth, which were then presumably extracted and sold to his dentist. Let's pause and truly consider what this means. We aren't just talking about a simple transaction. We are talking about individuals held in bondage, being compelled, whether by direct force or by the desperate circumstances of their enslavement, to have their teeth pulled from their mouths to serve the comfort of their enslaver. The power imbalance is staggering. It's a level of exploitation that is difficult to comprehend. Imagine the pain, both physical and emotional. For the enslaved person, giving up a tooth wasn't a choice made freely. It was a decision made under duress in a system that denied them ownership of their own bodies. Each tooth represented a piece of their humanity, taken from them. For them, there was no anesthesia, likely no proper medical care following the extraction, only a small payment that could never compensate for the violation they endured. This isn't just about Washington's dental hygiene. It's a powerful and painful illustration of the dehumanizing nature of slavery. It shows how the system commodified every part of a person, reducing them to mere resources to be used and discarded. The very teeth from their mouths were seen as property, just like the labor of their hands and the future of their children. So, how do we reconcile this with the image of George Washington, the father of his country? The truth is, we may not be able to. It's a contradiction we must sit with. Washington was a man of his time, but he was also a man who led a revolution based on the ideal that all men are created equal. Yet, his actions demonstrated that this ideal did not extend to the people he enslaved. Acknowledging this dark aspect of his life doesn't erase his historical significance, but it complicates it. It forces us to see him not as a flawless icon, but as a complex and deeply flawed human being. He was a leader who championed liberty on a national stage while simultaneously participating in and profiting from the brutal oppression of others on his own estate. The story of Washington's teeth serves as a potent reminder that history is not simple. It's messy, uncomfortable, and filled with contradictions. The fight for liberty has often been intertwined with acts of profound injustice. The freedom celebrated by some was built on the subjugation of others. By confronting these difficult truths, we gain a more honest and complete understanding of our past. It allows us to honor the progress that has been made while never forgetting the immense human cost. The voices of those unnamed individuals who lost their teeth are a quiet but persistent echo in the halls of history, reminding us of the long and ongoing struggle for true freedom and justice for all. We must remember that these were real people, with lives, families, and feelings, whose suffering has been largely silenced. By telling their story, we give them a measure of the dignity and recognition that was denied to them in their lifetimes. It is our responsibility to remember them, to acknowledge the injustice they faced, and to learn from it. This chapter of history is not meant to simply condemn a single man, but to understand the pervasive and corrupting influence of the system he was a part of. It challenges us to look beyond the monuments and the myths and to engage with the full, unvarnished story of our nation's origins. It is in facing these uncomfortable truths that we can truly appreciate the complexities of the past and work towards a more just and equitable future. Thank you for joining me on this difficult but necessary exploration. If this discussion has resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. Your support helps us continue to bring these important conversations to light. We'll see you in the next chapter. Have you ever wondered who is behind George Washington's infamous dentures? It wasn't just one person, but a team of skilled artisans who were essentially pioneers in the field of dentistry. Today, we're diving into the stories of these incredible craftsmen, especially one man who stands out, John Greenwood. Now let's get one thing straight. Contrary to popular myth, Washington's dentures were not made of wood. That's a story that's been passed down for generations. But the reality is far more complex and, honestly, much more fascinating. His dentures were crafted from a variety of materials, including human teeth, animal teeth like those from horses and donkeys, and most notably ivory from hippopotamuses and elephants. And holding it all together were lead bases, gold wires, and steel springs. It was a marvel of 18th century engineering. Among the several dentists who treated Washington throughout his life, John Greenwood was arguably the most significant. Born in 1760, Greenwood wasn't just a dentist. He was a true innovator. He served in the Revolutionary War as a fifer and a privateer before turning to dentistry, a profession he learned from his father. But Greenwood took it to a whole new level. He was one of the first American-born dentists to make a name for himself, blending science, artistry, and the burgeoning field of prosthetics. Imagine the scene: no modern drills, no comfortable reclining chairs, no anesthetics as we know them. Greenwood's workshop would have been filled with hand tools, files, and small saws. The process of creating a single set of dentures was painstakingly slow and required immense skill. Let's break down how he might have done it. First, he would need a base. This was often carved from a solid block of hippopotamus ivory. Why hippo ivory? It was incredibly dense and durable, and its fine grain could be polished to a smooth, porcelain-like finish. Greenwood would have to meticulously carve this block of ivory to fit the unique contours of Washington's gums. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all situation. He would have taken impressions, likely using beeswax, to create a model. Then, with files and carving tools, he'd shape the ivory, hollowing it out, ensuring it fits snugly and as comfortably as possible. This process alone could take days, even weeks, of precise, patient work. Once the base was shaped, it was time for the teeth. Greenwood used a combination of human teeth, which he likely acquired from other dentists, or even from graverobbers, a common practice at the time, and teeth from animals. These teeth had to be individually selected for size and shape, then drilled and attached to the ivory base using gold rivets or wire. Think about the artistic eye required for this. He wasn't just filling gaps. He was trying to create a natural-looking smile. He had to arrange the teeth in a way that looked aesthetically pleasing and was functional for chewing and speaking. But the real engineering challenge was making the upper and lower plates work together. To do this, Greenwood used powerful steel springs. These springs were attached to the sides of the dentures and were designed to push the plates firmly against the gums, holding them in place. However, these springs were constantly pushing the dentures apart, meaning Washington had to consciously clench his jaw to keep his mouth closed. Can you imagine the constant pressure and discomfort? It is a testament to his stoicism that he managed to lead a country while dealing with this day in and day out. Greenwood was also forward-thinking. In his correspondence with Washington, he constantly advised him on how to care for his dentures. He urged the president to clean them regularly and warned him that certain foods and drinks like port wine would stain the ivory. He even designed a special cleaning kit for Washington. This level of patient care was revolutionary for the time. He wasn't just a mechanic for the mouth. He was a healthcare provider. One of Greenwood's most famous sets for Washington, which is now on display, features a clever design. He left a hole in the lower denture to accommodate Washington's one remaining natural tooth. Greenwood believed strongly in preserving natural teeth whenever possible, a principle that is fundamental to modern dentistry today. He wrote to Washington, explaining that leaving the natural tooth would provide better stability for the lower denture. Unfortunately, Washington eventually had that last tooth pulled by another dentist, much to Greenwood's disappointment. When the tooth was sent to him, Greenwood had it encased in a small glass locket and kept it as a memento. The relationship between Washington and Greenwood was more than just patient and dentist. It was one of mutual respect. Washington trusted Greenwood's skill and advice, and Greenwood took immense pride in serving the president. He was creating smiles for one of the most famous faces in the world, using nothing but his hands, his tools, and his ingenuity. The work of John Greenwood and other artisans of his era laid the groundwork for modern prosthodontics. They were working without the benefit of X-rays, modern materials, or sterile environments. Every set of dentures was a unique piece of sculpture, a functional work of art born from necessity. The painstaking process of carving ivory, fitting metal springs, and meticulously shaping each tooth highlights a level of craftsmanship that is truly awe-inspiring. So the next time you see a portrait of George Washington, look closely at his mouth. You might notice a certain stiffness in his jaw or a bulge in his lips. That's not just an artistic quirk. It's the physical manifestation of the heavy, cumbersome, yet masterfully crafted dentures he wore. And behind those dentures is the story of artisans like John Greenwood pioneers who, through their incredible skill and dedication, helped shape not just smiles but the very foundations of modern dentistry. Their legacy isn't just in the artifacts left behind, but in the millions of smiles that are restored and created every year thanks to the path they forged. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the 18th century world of dentistry. It is a fascinating corner of history that tells us so much about the challenges and triumphs of the past. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more incredible stories from history, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'll see you in the next video. Hello and welcome back to our deep dive into the life of George Washington. Today, in Chapter 9, we re-peeling back the layers of the portraits to reveal the pain beneath the portraits. We all know the image, the stern, tight-lipped founding father staring out from the dollar bill, or the famous Gilbert Stuart painting. But have you ever wondered why he almost never smiles? The answer lies in something incredibly personal and, frankly, painful: his dentures. By the time he became president, Washington had only one of his own teeth left. He wore dentures, but these weren't the comfortable, custom-fit pieces we have today. His were marvels of 18th century engineering, but also instruments of discomfort. They were crafted from a variety of materials, including hippopotamus ivory, cow teeth, and even human teeth, though, contrary to popular myth, never would. These materials were carved and held together by a metal framework, often with powerful steel springs. Now imagine having a contraption like that in your mouth. Those springs were designed to push the upper and lower plates apart, holding them firmly against his gums. But this constant pressure was a source of immense difficulty. It made his mouth bulge unnaturally and required constant muscle control to even keep his lips closed. Speaking was a challenge, as the dentures could slip or click. And as for eating? It was a slow, deliberate, and often painful process. He had to cut his food into tiny pieces. This daily struggle had a profound impact on his public persona. Washington was acutely aware of how he appeared to others. He was a man who understood the power of image, especially as the leader of a new nation. The constant discomfort and the difficulty of controlling his facial muscles likely contributed to his famously reserved and stoic demeanor. That stern, unsmiling expression we see in his portraits wasn't just a stylistic choice of the era. It was a reflection of his physical reality. Think about the famous Athenaeum portrait by Gilbert Stuart, the one that became the basis for the image on the $1 bill. Stuart actually had to pack Washington's mouth with cotton to make his face look less sunken from the ill-fitting dentures. The result is an image of a man who looks resolute and serious, but it hides a story of constant pain. His tight-lipped look wasn't a sign of a sour disposition, but rather a man battling to maintain his composure and dignity while enduring significant discomfort. Letters from Washington himself reveal his frustration. He wrote to his dentist doctor John Greenwood, complaining about the fit and function of his dentures, describing how they are both uneasy in the mouth and bulge my lips out in a way that is both unseemly and embarrassing. He was constantly sending them back for adjustments, a testament to the ongoing problems they caused. He even had a special tool for cleaning them, highlighting the meticulous care they required. This discomfort didn't just affect his portraits. It affected his public speaking. Washington's inaugural address was famously short. While brevity was a virtue, some historians suggest his dental issues may have played a role. Delivering long, passionate speeches would have been physically taxing and risked a humiliating slip of his dentures. So he learned to be concise, letting his carefully chosen words carry the weight that a more animated delivery could not. When we look at those portraits now, we can see them in a new light. We're not just looking at a historical figure. We're looking at a human being who endured chronic pain with incredible fortitude. The pressure of the springs in his mouth was a constant, private battle, fought even as he led a revolution and built a country. His famous stoicism becomes even more remarkable when you realize the physical struggle he was concealing from the world. He was literally gritting his teeth, not just figuratively. The pain beneath the portraits adds a powerful layer of humanity to our understanding of George Washington. It reminds us that our national heroes were real people with real-life problems. His ability to lead, to inspire, and to project an image of unwavering strength while dealing with such a personal and persistent ailment is a testament to his incredible character and resilience. He truly was a man of iron will, in more ways than one. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the more personal side of history. I hope this gives you a new appreciation for the man behind the myth. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our historical journey. Today, we delve into a deeply personal and often overlooked aspect of George Washington's life, his lifelong struggle with dental problems. While we often see him as the stoic general and the resolute first president, his private letters reveal a man in near constant discomfort, a quiet suffering that he endured with remarkable fortitude. In this chapter, Letters of Discomfort, we'll let Washington's own words, penned centuries ago, paint a vivid picture of his pain and his persistent search for relief. Imagine being the leader of a fledgling nation, burdened with the immense weight of war and politics, while simultaneously battling excruciating toothaches. This was Washington's reality. His dental issues began much earlier than most people realize. By the time he took his first oath of office in 1789, he had only one of his own teeth left. The iconic image of a grim-faced Washington is often attributed to his poorly fitting dentures, which made speaking and even smiling a challenge. But the story is much deeper than just uncomfortable false teeth. It's a tale of constant pain, endless adjustments, and a desperate search for a solution in an era of primitive dentistry. Let's begin by stepping back to the Revolutionary War. Even as he led the Continental Army, Washington was frequently distracted by dental ailments. In a letter to his cousin Lund Washington, who was managing his Mount Vernon estate, he wrote not of battle strategy, but of a small dental tool. In 1781, he penned, "I will be much obliged to you for sending me ... scrapers, or whatever they are called, for cleaning the teeth." This seemingly minor request highlights a major preoccupation. Here is the commander-in-chief, amidst the chaos of war, concerned about basic dental hygiene, likely in a desperate attempt to preserve what few teeth he had left and to alleviate his discomfort. It's a humanizing glimpse into the daily struggles that lay beneath his public persona. His letters from this period are sprinkled with references to toothaches and swollen gums, pains that would have been debilitating for anyone, let alone someone commanding an army. As the years went on, Washington's reliance on dentures became absolute. These weren't the porcelain and acrylic creations we know today. His were crafted from a variety of materials, including human teeth, animal teeth likely from horses or cows, and ivory, often from hippopotamus or elephant tusks. These materials were porous, prone to staining, and would have emitted an unpleasant odor over time. They were held together with lead, brass screws, and steel springs. The springs were designed to push the upper and lower plates apart, forcing them against the gums to stay in place. Can you imagine the constant pressure and irritation this would cause? It's no wonder he so rarely smiled in his portraits. His main dentist was Dr. John Greenwood of New York, a pioneer in American dentistry. Their correspondence provides an unparalleled window into Washington's ordeal. In a letter from 1791, Washington writes to Greenwood with a mix of politeness and desperation. He complains that his new set of dentures is ill-fitting, causing him to lisp. "I send you the old broken set," he writes, "and request you will have the goodness to repair them. The new set you made for me are both too wide and too projecting." He was meticulous in his descriptions, trying to articulate the precise nature of the problem. He notes how the dentures push his lips out, altering his appearance and his speech. A significant concern for a man who had to deliver public addresses, including his inaugural speeches. Think about the vulnerability in these letters. Here is the President of the United States, a figure of immense authority, essentially pleading with his dentist for a solution. He details the bulkiness and the uneasiness of the dentures. In another letter, he describes how they plague him. This wasn't just a matter of vanity, it was about function and comfort. He needed to be able to speak clearly and eat without pain. In 1796, Washington wrote to Greenwood again, expressing his frustration. He had sent his dentures for an adjustment, and upon their return, found them even less comfortable. "The teeth have, by some means or other, got out of place," he explains, adding that they are very little use to me. He even includes a detailed drawing to illustrate how the dentures had become misaligned. This shows his analytical mind at work, even when dealing with a personal, physical ailment. He was trying to problem-solve his own dental crisis. One of the most poignant letters was written in 1797. Washington describes the dark color his ivory dentures had taken on. He asks Dr. Greenwood, "The set you sent me have been stained by port wine. I have not been able to get the stain out." Greenwood's reply is fascinating. He advises Washington to be more diligent in cleaning them, but also warns him against using overly abrasive powders. Then he adds a crucial piece of advice. "I advise you to not take them out at night. The keeping of them in the mouth keeps them sweet." The idea of sleeping with these bulky, uncomfortable contraptions is hard to fathom, yet it was considered the best practice at the time to prevent the ivory from drying out and cracking. Another letter from December 1798, just a year before his death, is perhaps the most telling of his long suffering. He writes to Dr. Greenwood, enclosing a payment and one of his last remaining natural teeth, which had finally fallen out. "I send you a tooth," Washington writes, "which I have just taken from my jaw. I have now but one tooth left in my upper jaw." He then expresses his gratitude to Greenwood, acknowledging the dentist's great attention to my wants. But he also conveys a sense of resignation. He asks Greenwood to preserve the extracted tooth and to add it to the denture frame, a common practice at the time to help anchor the device. He includes a scraper, requesting, "I should be glad to have it returned with the tooth when you send that." Even at the very end of his life, plagued by so many physical ailments, his dental tools and the hope for a better fit were still on his mind. This particular letter is incredibly moving. There's a quiet endurance in his words. There's no dramatic complaint, just a statement of fact and a practical request. He had been battling this for decades, and his correspondence reveals a man who was patient, methodical, and incredibly resilient. He wasn't just a patient. He was an active participant in his own dental care, providing detailed feedback, making suggestions, and trying to understand the mechanics of his dentures. He was trying to solve a problem that, with the technology of his time, was almost unsolvable. Let's pause and consider the man behind these letters. We see George Washington on our currency, a stoic and powerful figure. But these writings reveal his humanity, his vulnerability, and his incredible capacity to endure chronic pain while leading a nation. His struggle was not a secret he kept entirely to himself. He discussed it frankly with his dentist, seeking a practical solution to a relentless problem. The soft, aging script of these old letters carries the weight of his quiet suffering. He doesn't rail against his fate. He simply works the problem, just as he did on the battlefield and in the political arena. His perseverance in the face of this personal, nagging discomfort is, in its own way, as heroic as his more public victories. It adds another layer to our understanding of his character, a man of immense strength, not just of will, but of endurance. Thank you for joining us for this intimate look into a little-known chapter of George Washington's life. His letters offer a powerful reminder that even the greatest figures in history faced the same human struggles as the rest of us. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the pages of history. We'd love to have you with us on our next exploration. Until then, take care. Hello and welcome back to our deep dive into the lives of those who have shaped history. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a side of the presidency rarely seen. A story of incredible resilience hidden behind the resolute desk. This is Chapter 11, A President in Pain. When we picture a president, we see strength, authority, and unwavering composure. But what happens when the person holding the most powerful office in the world is also battling relentless chronic pain? This was the silent reality for one of our most iconic leaders. His stoicism wasn't just a political tool. It was a daily necessity, a shield against a physical agony that few ever witnessed. Imagine standing for hours at a state dinner, every joint screaming in protest. Yet you must smile, engage in complex diplomacy, and project an image of absolute control. Think about delivering a State of the Union address, the eyes of the world upon you, while sharp, radiating pain shoots through your body. This wasn't a hypothetical for him. It was his Tuesday. There are countless anecdotes, often shared years later by close aides, that paint a vivid picture of his struggle. One tells of a crucial national security meeting where he sat, stone-faced and decisive, while grappling with a flare-up so intense that an assistant later found his knuckles, white from clenching the arms of his chair. He never flinched, never gave a sign of the war being waged within his own body. He understood that any perceived weakness, even a justifiable grimace of pain, could be misinterpreted by allies and adversaries alike. The stakes were simply too high. Another instance, now part of the quiet lore of the West Wing, involved a long, grueling international summit. The days were packed with back-to-back negotiations, photo ops, and formal ceremonies, many of which required long periods of standing. During a brief break, a Secret Service agent saw him lean against the wall in a secluded corridor, his eyes briefly shut, his face a mask of exhaustion and discomfort. The moment the door opened, the mask of the presidency was back on. The smile returned, the confident stride was there, and he stepped back onto the world stage as if he didn't have a care in the world. He was compartmentalizing on a level most of us can't even fathom. This physical endurance was a parallel presidency. There was the public one, filled with policy debates, bill signings, and global diplomacy. Then there was the private one, a constant battle against his own physical limits. It required a different kind of strength, a mental fortitude that was perhaps even more impressive than his political victories. He would often use subtle tricks to manage his discomfort. During long speeches, he might shift his weight almost imperceptibly or grip the sides of the podium a little tighter. In meetings, he might adjust his chair in a way that looked casual but was actually a desperate attempt to find a less painful position. These weren't signs of weakness. They were signs of an extraordinary commitment to duty. He believed the office was bigger than his personal suffering. The needs of the nation, the demands of the moment, always came first. He couldn't just call in sick. He couldn't ask for a timeout. The world doesn't stop for one person's pain, especially when that person is the President of the United States. His physicians worked tirelessly, of course, employing a range of treatments to provide what relief they could, but a permanent cure was elusive. So he adapted. He learned to operate at an elite level while carrying a burden that would have sidelined most people. His schedule was relentless, often starting before dawn and ending late into the night. He would travel across time zones, enduring cramped flights and uncomfortable accommodations, all while putting on a brave face for the cameras and the public. This chapter of his life is a powerful lesson in resilience. It redefines what we mean by presidential strength. It wasn't just about making tough decisions or facing down political opponents. It was about showing up every single day and giving your all, even when your body is begging you to stop. It was a stoicism that was more than just emotional control. It was a triumph of will over physical reality. He rarely let the pain show, not out of pride, but out of a profound sense of service. He shouldered the pain so the nation wouldn't have to worry. This hidden aspect of his presidency adds a deeply human layer to a figure often seen as larger than life. It reminds us that behind the titles and the ceremony are real people, with their own vulnerabilities and struggles. His ability to lead so effectively, while simultaneously managing such a significant personal challenge, is perhaps one of the most remarkable, yet least told, stories of his time in office. Thank you for joining us on this exploration into a president's private battle. It's a testament to the human spirit and the sacrifices made in the name of duty. If you found this story as compelling as we do, please hit that like button. And be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter in our series. We appreciate you watching and we'll see you in the next video. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that might make you a little squeamish but is absolutely fascinating. Dentistry in the 18th century. Specifically, we're going to explore how your social class determined the fate of your teeth. We often hear stories about George Washington and his famous dentures, but what was the reality for the average person? Let's find out. Let's start at the top, with the wealthy elite. Imagine being a prominent figure in the 18th century. Your appearance was everything. A full, bright smile wasn't just about health. It was a powerful symbol of status, wealth, and refinement. Losing your teeth could mean losing your social standing. So the rich poured considerable resources into preserving their pearly whites. They had access to the most skilled practitioners of the time, who weren't always called dentists back then. They might be surgeons, artisans, or even jewelers who specialized in dental work. These early dental experts offered a range of services. For a simple toothache, they might use oil of cloves or other herbal remedies to numb the pain. They practiced teeth cleaning, scraping away plaque and tartar with metal instruments. And they even offered whitening treatments, though these were often highly abrasive and damaging, using acidic solutions that could erode the enamel. The goal was a pristine white smile, no matter the long-term cost to the tooth's health. But what happened when a tooth couldn't be saved? This is where it gets really interesting. For the wealthy, extraction was an option, but it was often a last resort. The real mark of privilege was the ability to replace a lost tooth. This led to the creation of some of the earliest and most elaborate dentures. And when we talk about dentures, we have to talk about George Washington. His struggles with dental health are legendary. Throughout his adult life, he lost teeth one by one, suffering from constant pain and infections. By the time he was inaugurated as the first president, he had only one of his natural teeth left. His dentures were marvels of 18th century craftsmanship, but they were also instruments of torment. They weren't made of wood, as the popular myth suggests. Instead, they were crafted from a combination of materials: a base carved from hippopotamus ivory, and teeth made from a mix of human teeth, cow teeth, and elephant ivory. These were held together by gold wires and heavy-duty springs that painfully pushed the dentures against his gums. They were clunky, uncomfortable, and made speaking and eating a daily challenge. Letters and diary entries reveal his constant agony. So, while his dentures were a symbol of his ability to afford the best, they were a far cry from the comfortable solutions we have today. Now, let's shift our focus away from the powdered wigs and gilded halls of the elite and step into the world of the common person. For the vast majority of the population, farmers, laborers, shopkeepers, the dental experience was drastically different. There were no specialized dentists in their villages. If you had a toothache, your options were grim and limited. You might visit the local blacksmith or a traveling barber surgeon. These individuals were strong, and their primary tool for a toothache was a pair of pliers. There was no anesthetic, no sterile equipment. An extraction was a brutal public spectacle, often performed at a market or fair to draw a crowd. The practitioner would hold the patient down and yank the tooth out with sheer force. The risk of infection, a broken jaw, or damage to surrounding teeth was incredibly high. For most people, a toothache was a terrifying ordeal that ended in a violent extraction or, if left untreated, a life-threatening infection. And what about prevention? The concept of daily dental hygiene as we know it didn't exist for the masses. While the rich might use tooth powders and brushes, the average person might at best rub their teeth with a coarse cloth and soot or salt. Sugar was becoming more available, and diets were often poor, leading to widespread decay. As a result, most people in the 18th century, once they reached middle age, had already lost many of their teeth. Gaps in their smile, or a complete lack of teeth, were simply a fact of life. There was no replacing these lost teeth. Dentures like Washington's were unimaginably expensive. So people just lived with it. They adapted to eating soft foods, and their appearance reflected a life of hardship. A mouth full of rotting or missing teeth was so common that it wasn't seen as unusual. It was the norm. This visual difference was one of the most striking class dividers of the era. You could literally tell someone's social standing just by looking at their mouth. A full set of teeth signaled wealth, while a gap-toothed grin signaled a life of labor and poverty. This stark contrast highlights a fundamental truth about the 18th century. Access to healthcare, even something as basic as dental care, was a privilege, not a right. The pain was universal, but the solutions were not. The agony Washington felt from his high-tech, custom-made dentures was a world away from the agony of a farmer facing a blacksmith's pliers with nothing to numb the pain. Both suffered, but the context and the outcomes were shaped entirely by their place in society. So the next time you see a portrait from the 18th century, pay close attention to the mouth. Is the subject smiling with a full set of teeth, or is their mouth closed, perhaps hiding a dental reality they'd rather not show? It's a small detail that tells a big story about class, privilege, and the painful history of our smiles. The advancements we enjoy in modern dentistry, painless procedures, effective hygiene, and accessible care are things people in the 18th century could only dream of. It's a good reminder to appreciate just how far we've come. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the past. We'll see you in the next video. Have you ever heard that George Washington had wooden teeth? It's one of the most famous facts about the first U.S. president. A detail taught in schools and repeated in pop culture for centuries. But what if I told you it's not true? Not even a little bit. Today, we're diving deep into one of America's most enduring myths, uncovering the real story behind Washington's dental struggles, and exploring why the fiction of wooden teeth became more famous than the fascinating truth. Let's start by setting the record straight. George Washington never had wooden teeth. It's a complete fabrication. So, where did this idea come from? To understand that, we need to look at what was actually in his mouth. Washington suffered from dental problems for most of his adult life. He lost his first tooth in his early 20s, and by the time he became president in 1789, he only had one single natural tooth left. His dental issues were a constant source of pain and embarrassment for him. He wrote about it extensively in his letters and diaries, detailing the discomfort, the ill-fitting dentures, and the social anxiety it caused him. The dentures he did have were state-of-the-art for the 18th century, but by our standards they were pretty grim. They were crafted from a variety of materials, none of which were wood. The bases were typically carved from hippopotamus ivory or lead, and the teeth? They were a macabre collection of human teeth, likely purchased from the poor or sourced from deceased individuals, as well as teeth from animals like horses and donkeys. Yes, you heard that right. The President of the United States had a mouthful of second-hand teeth and animal parts, all held together by metal springs and wires. Imagine trying to deliver an inaugural address with that contraption in your mouth. The springs were necessary to keep the upper and lower plates forced apart, meaning he had to constantly clench his jaw to keep his mouth closed. This is believed to be the reason for his famously stern and tight-lipped expression in many portraits. It wasn't because he was grumpy. It was because he was trying to keep his teeth from popping out. So if his dentures were made of ivory, lead, and other people's teeth, why the wooden story? The most likely explanation is a simple misunderstanding combined with the passage of time. The hippopotamus ivory used for the denture base was prone to staining. Over the years, from things like wine, coffee, and general use, the white ivory would absorb stains and develop fine cracks and a brownish, grained appearance. To someone viewing these dentures centuries later, they might genuinely look like they were carved from a piece of wood. The myth was likely born from this visual misinterpretation. Someone saw the discolored, grain-like texture of the old ivory and simply assumed it was wood. But the story doesn't end there. The myth didn't just survive, it thrived. And the reason for its popularity is far more interesting than a simple case of mistaken identity. It speaks to the kind of hero America wanted George Washington to be. Think about it. The image of a powerful leader with simple, hand-carved wooden teeth is incredibly compelling. It paints a picture of a man who is humble, resourceful, and unpretentious. He's not adorned with gold or ivory. He's a man of the people, practical and down-to-earth. This version of Washington is a symbol of American modesty and perseverance. This wooden-toothed Washington was a much more appealing figure for patriotic storytellers than the real, more complicated version. The truth is messy. The fact that the nation's founding father wore dentures made from teeth pulled from the mouths of the poor and enslaved people is a difficult and uncomfortable reality. It highlights the stark class and racial inequalities of the time. The story of Washington buying teeth is a stark reminder of the harsh realities of 18th century life, where poverty could force someone to sell a part of their own body. It's a detail that complicates the clean, heroic narrative we often prefer for our national icons. The wooden teeth myth, therefore, functions as a kind of historical whitewashing. It replaces a complex and unsettling truth with a simple, virtuous fable. The story of a homespun hero whittling his own teeth is a tale of rustic ingenuity. It fits perfectly into the folklore of a young nation trying to define itself. It shares the same impulse that gave us the story of Washington and the cherry tree, a moral tale designed to teach a lesson about honesty, even though it never actually happened. The wooden teeth myth teaches a lesson about humility and simplicity. In this way, the myth became a powerful piece of American symbolism. It allowed people to connect with Washington on a more personal, folksy level. He wasn't just a general and a president. He was a relatable figure who, in this imagined story, faced his problems with simple, honest materials. The myth served a purpose. It helped construct an idealized version of a founding father, one who embodied the virtues the new republic wished to see in itself. The storytellers of the 19th century, like Parson Weems, who invented the cherry tree story, understood the power of a good narrative. They weren't always concerned with historical accuracy. They were concerned with building a national character. A president with wooden teeth was a better character for their national drama than a president with dentures made from ivory and sourced in morally ambiguous ways. The myth was, simply put, a better story. It was more patriotic, more inspiring, and far less problematic. So the next time you hear someone mention George Washington's wooden teeth, you can share the real story. The truth is far more complex and revealing. It tells us about the pain he endured, the technological limitations of his time, and the uncomfortable social realities of the 18th century. But the myth itself also tells a story about America's need for heroes and our desire to create simple, moral tales to explain our past. The fiction of the wooden teeth has become a part of Washington's legacy, a symbol not of the man himself, but of how generations of Americans have chosen to remember him. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical deep dive. It's amazing how a simple myth can reveal so much about our history and ourselves. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories from the past. Let me know in the comments what other historical myths you'd like me to tackle next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hello and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into a fascinating and perhaps surprising piece of history: how George Washington's infamous dental struggles became a catalyst for modern dentistry. It's a story of personal pain that led to national progress. So grab a snack, preferably something soft, and let's get started. When you picture George Washington, what comes to mind? The stoic face on the dollar bill, right? That famously tight-lipped expression wasn't just for show. It was a direct result of a lifetime of severe dental problems. Washington began losing his teeth in his early 20s, and by the time he became president, he had only one natural tooth left. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a source of constant pain, insecurity, and social difficulty. His letters are filled with complaints about his aching gums, ill-fitting dentures, and the trouble he had speaking and eating. He wrote to his dentists frequently, describing his suffering in detail and begging for relief. This constant struggle made him acutely aware of the importance of dental health, a subject that was largely neglected in the 18th century. Most people at the time simply accepted tooth loss as an inevitable part of aging. But Washington's high-profile battle with it brought the issue into the public consciousness like never before. Let's talk about those dentures. Forget the myth about wooden teeth. That's a historical inaccuracy. Washington's dentures were actually state-of-the-art for his time, but that isn't saying much. They were crafted from a bizarre assortment of materials: hippopotamus ivory, cow teeth, and even human teeth, likely purchased from his own enslaved workers or from poor individuals. These materials were porous, stained easily, and caused a host of problems. The dentures were held together by heavy lid bases and powerful steel springs, which were designed to force the jaws open. Imagine having to constantly clench your jaw just to keep your mouth closed. It's no wonder he looked so grim in his portraits. These contraptions were not only uncomfortable, but also distorted the shape of his face. His personal dentist, Dr. John Greenwood, was one of the most innovative practitioners of the era. He and Washington had a long-standing correspondence, not just about treatments, but about design and materials. Washington wasn't a passive patient. He was an active participant in the design of his own prosthetics. He would send his broken dentures back to Greenwood with detailed notes and suggestions for improvement. This collaboration, born of desperation, pushed the boundaries of what was possible in 18th-century dental technology. Washington's very visible struggle had an unintended but powerful effect on American society. As the nation's most revered figure, his personal health issues were a matter of public interest. People saw his discomfort, heard the difficulty in his speech, and learned about his constant search for a solution. This raised a crucial question in the minds of many. If the great general and president suffered so much, what could be done to prevent this fate for others? This shift in public awareness was the first crucial step toward establishing dentistry as a respected and necessary medical field. Before Washington's time, dentistry was often performed by blacksmiths or barbers, with extraction being the primary and often brutal solution. The idea of preserving teeth was revolutionary. Washington's demand for better solutions spurred innovation among the few dedicated practitioners of the time. Dentists, like Dr. Greenwood, were encouraged to experiment with new materials, impression techniques, and designs. They were essentially prototyping the future of prosthodontics, with the President of the United States as their most demanding client. This new focus on dental health didn't happen overnight, of course, but the seeds were planted. In the decades following Washington's death in 1799, the field of dentistry began to formalize. The world's first dental college, the Baltimore College of Dental Surgery, was established in 1840. This marked a pivotal moment, transforming dentistry from a trade into a true profession, grounded in scientific principles. It's not a stretch to say that the memory of Washington's suffering contributed to the perceived need for such an institution. The founders sought to create a new generation of educated dentists who could offer their patients better options than Washington ever had. The 19th century saw an explosion of dental innovation that can be traced back to the problems Washington faced. The search for better denture materials led to the development of vulcanite, a hardened rubber, in the 1850s. This was a game-changer. It was more comfortable, more stable, and more affordable than ivory, making functional dentures accessible to the general public for the first time. This directly addressed the instability and discomfort Washington constantly complained about. Furthermore, the focus shifted from mere replacement to preservation. The establishment of dental schools meant that new techniques for treating decay and gum disease were being researched and taught. The importance of hygiene, brushing teeth, and cleaning the mouth became more widely understood. This was a direct legacy of Washington's experience. His struggle highlighted the dire consequences of neglect. He became the posthumous poster child for preventative dental care. So, while George Washington never enjoyed the benefits of modern dentistry, his personal ordeals served a greater purpose. His high-profile suffering illuminated a widespread problem. His demands for better solutions spurred early innovation, and his legacy helped inspire the professionalization of the entire field. He inadvertently laid the groundwork for the dental care that we often take for granted today, from routine cleanings and fillings to advanced orthodontics and implants. The next time you brush your teeth or visit your dentist for a checkup, take a moment to think of George Washington. His painful journey helped pave the way for our modern smiles. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest progress can arise from the most personal of struggles. His legacy isn't just in the founding of a nation, but also, in a strange and profound way, in the health of its citizens' teeth. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical deep dive. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more surprising stories from the past. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next video. We'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our deep dive into the lives of historical giants. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a figure we all think we know, George Washington. But we're not talking about crossing the Delaware or his presidency. We're getting personal. We're going to explore a side of Washington that reveals his vanity, his secrecy, and a deep-seated insecurity that makes this larger-than-life figure feel surprisingly human. Let's talk about George Washington's teeth. Now, we've all heard the myth about Washington's wooden teeth, right? Well, let's bust that one right away. It's not true. But the reality is far more complex and frankly more poignant. From a young age, Washington suffered from terrible dental problems. By the time he was inaugurated as the first president, he had only one of his own teeth left in his mouth. 1. Can you imagine the constant pain and discomfort? His solution was a series of dentures, but these were nothing like the ones we have today. They were crafted from a variety of materials, including human teeth likely purchased from his enslaved workers, as well as ivory from hippos and elephants, and held together with metal springs and wires. They were clunky, ill-fitting, and a constant source of trouble. They distorted the shape of his mouth and jaw, which you can actually see if you look closely at his later portraits, especially the famous one by Gilbert Stuart. His lips are unnaturally tight, his jaw tense. That wasn't an artistic choice. That was the reality of living with these cumbersome contraptions. This wasn't just a physical problem for Washington. It was a profound source of personal embarrassment. Think about the man we see in portraits: stoic, serious, reserved. We often interpret this as a sign of his strong, silent leadership. But a huge part of that famous reserve was a conscious effort to hide his teeth. He was incredibly self-conscious about them. He rarely smiled in public, and when he spoke, he did so carefully, trying to minimize the movement of his mouth. He worried the dentures would slip or make a clicking sound. This insecurity dominated his private life. His letters are filled with correspondence to his dentist, Dr. John Greenwood. He would send his dentures back and forth by mail for adjustments, wrapped discreetly. These letters reveal a man obsessed with the fit, the function, and the appearance of his false teeth. He'd write detailed instructions, complaining about how they stained, how they pushed out his lip, and how he struggled to eat with them. He pleaded with his dentist to keep these matters private, showing a vulnerability we rarely associate with the father of his country. He was constantly asking Dr. Greenwood to clean them, to tighten them, to make them look more natural. In one letter, he even included his one remaining natural tooth, which had finally fallen out, asking the dentist to save it, and perhaps incorporate it into a new set. There's something so human and almost heartbreaking about that request. He was holding on to the last piece of his original self. This wasn't the stoic general on a battlefield. This was a man struggling with an aspect of his physical appearance, just like any of us might. This constant battle with his dental health affected his diet and his social life. He often had to stick to soft foods, and public dinners, a huge part of political life back then, must have been an ordeal. Imagine trying to navigate a state dinner, making conversation with foreign dignitaries, all while worrying that your teeth are going to pop out of your mouth. It adds a whole new layer to our understanding of his personality. His quietness, his reputation for being aloof or distant, might have been less about his temperament and more about a very practical, very personal fear of embarrassment. This detail, this secret struggle, doesn't diminish Washington's greatness. In fact, it enhances it. It chips away at the marble statue and reveals the man underneath. It shows us that even the most powerful and revered figures in history have their own insecurities, their own private battles. He was a general leading an army, a president shaping a new nation, and all the while, he was hiding a secret that made him feel shy and vulnerable. He was worried about how he looked, how he sounded, and what people thought of him. It's a powerful reminder that history is made by real people, with real problems. The next time you see a portrait of George Washington, with that stern, tight-lipped expression, maybe you'll see something different. You'll see not just the stoic leader, but also the man who was painfully self-conscious about his smile. A man who, in that one very specific way, might not have been so different from the rest of us. It makes him more than a historical figure. It makes him relatable. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into Washington's more personal world. It's these little details that truly bring history to life. If you enjoyed this and want to uncover more hidden stories, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to have you back. Thanks for watching. Have you ever wondered what connects us to the historical giants of the past? It's often the small, personal items that tell the most human stories. And when it comes to George Washington, few artifacts are as personal or as surprisingly complex as his dentures. Today, let us take a journey to Mount Vernon to uncover the story behind one of its most famous exhibits. We all know the myth of George Washington's wooden teeth. It's a story told to schoolchildren for generations. But the reality is far more fascinating and, frankly, a bit more grisly. The truth is, Washington never had wooden teeth. Instead, he suffered from dental problems his entire adult life, and by the time he became president, he had only one of his own teeth left. To solve this, he relied on the best dental technology of the 18th century. His dentures were crafted from a combination of materials you might not expect. We're talking about a lead base, carefully fitted with human teeth, yes, actual human teeth. Likely purchased as well as teeth and bone from animals like horses and donkeys. Some sets even incorporated ivory from hippos and elephants. Can you imagine putting that in your mouth every day? These weren't just simple false teeth. They were complex contraptions. Held together by steel springs and gold wires, they were notoriously uncomfortable. Letters from Washington reveal his constant struggle. He complained that they were bulky, painful, and made it difficult to speak and eat naturally. They even distorted the shape of his face, which you can subtly see in some of his later portraits if you look closely. The famous stoic, tight-lipped expression of Washington might have been less about his serious demeanor and more about the challenge of simply keeping his teeth in place. Think about the man leading a revolution and founding a nation, all while dealing with chronic pain and the insecurity of ill-fitting dentures. It adds such a relatable, human layer to a figure who often seems larger than life. It reminds us that behind the stoic portraits and grand monuments was a real person facing everyday struggles, just like us. So where are these incredible pieces of history today? The most complete surviving set of George Washington's dentures is carefully preserved and displayed at his beloved home, Mount Vernon in Virginia. When you visit the museum there, you can see them for yourself. They are housed in a climate-controlled case, a testament to their fragility and historical importance. Seeing them in person is a powerful experience. You're looking at an object that was intimately part of Washington's daily life. You can see the intricate craftsmanship, the different materials fused together, and you can almost feel the discomfort he must have endured. They are among the most fascinating and revealing relics of early American history and prosthetic design. The preservation of these dentures is a meticulous process. Conservators at Mount Vernon work tirelessly to ensure that these artifacts survive for future generations. The materials ivory, bone, lead, and gold all react differently to changes in temperature and humidity. Special care must be taken to prevent them from degrading. It's a delicate balance of science and historical preservation. Why do we put so much effort into saving something like a set of old dentures? Because they connect us directly to the man behind the legend. They strip away the myth and show us Washington in a raw, vulnerable light. He wasn't a marble statue. He was a man who suffered, who sought solutions to his problems, and who persevered despite physical discomfort. These dentures are more than just a historical curiosity. They are a symbol of resilience. They tell a story not just about 18th century dentistry, but about the human condition itself. They remind us that our historical heroes were flesh and blood, with their own pains and imperfections. Next time you see a portrait of George Washington, remember the story of his teeth. Remember the man who led a country while struggling with something so profoundly personal. It's these details that bring history to life. transforming a distant figure into someone we can understand and admire even more. The dentures at Mount Vernon aren't just an exhibit. They're a direct link to the real George Washington. So, if you ever get the chance to visit Mount Vernon, make sure you take a moment to look at this incredible piece of history. It's a small object that tells a massive story about strength, ingenuity, and the enduring humanity of one of America's greatest figures. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical deep dive. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that bring the past to life. Let me know in the comments what other historical artifacts you'd like to learn about. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever looked closely at a portrait of George Washington? I mean, really closely? You've probably seen dozens of them, on dollar bills, in textbooks, in museums. But have you ever noticed that something seems a little different from one painting to the next? Specifically, his mouth. Welcome to Chapter 17, The Portrait Artist's Challenge. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating and, frankly, awkward problems that faced the greatest artists of the 18th century. How to paint the first president of the United States without making him look weird. It's a well-documented fact that George Washington had terrible dental problems. By the time he became president, he had only one of his own teeth left. He wore various sets of dentures, and none of them were comfortable. They were made from materials like hippopotamus ivory, cow teeth, and even human teeth, but never wood. That's a myth. These contraptions were bulky, ill-fitting, and often caused him significant pain and discomfort. They pushed out his lips and made his jaw look stiff and unnatural. So imagine you're a renowned artist like Gilbert Stuart or Charles Willson Peale. The most powerful man in the new nation is sitting for you. Your job is to capture not just his likeness, but his essence, his strength, his dignity, his leadership. But there's a problem. His mouth is a mess. His dentures are causing his lower face to bulge, and he looks like he's constantly clenching his jaw in discomfort. What do you do? This was the great challenge. Each artist had to make an artistic choice. Do you paint exactly what you see, risking a portrait that looks awkward or even grumpy? Or do you take some artistic license to create the image of the stoic, noble leader everyone expected to see? Let's look at some examples. Take the famous Athenaeum portrait by Gilbert Stuart. This is the one you see on the $1 bill. If you look at it, Washington's jaw is incredibly firm, almost unnaturally so. His lips are tightly pressed together. Stuart reportedly stuffed cotton in Washington's mouth to try and plump out his sunken cheeks. But the result was this incredibly tense expression. Some historians believe Stuart intentionally exaggerated the jawline to project an image of unwavering strength and determination. He wasn't just painting a man. He was crafting an icon. The strong jaw became a symbol of a strong nation. But other artists took a different approach. Look at the portraits by Charles Willson Peale. Peale painted Washington many times over several decades, starting when Washington was a younger man. In his later portraits, Peale often softened the features around Washington's mouth. The expression is a bit more relaxed, perhaps a little more human and approachable. Peale seemed more interested in capturing the man behind the title, including his visible discomfort. In some of his works, you can almost sense the strain Washington was under. It's a more realistic and perhaps more sympathetic portrayal. Then you have the sculpture by Jean-Antoine Houdon. To get the most accurate likeness, Houdon created a life mask of Washington. This involved plaster being directly applied to Washington's face. Can you imagine how uncomfortable that must have been, especially with his dental issues? But the result is considered one of the most accurate representations of Washington we have. And what do we see? We see a man with a firm but not overly exaggerated jaw. His mouth is closed, but it doesn't look as painfully tense as in some paintings. Houdon found a middle ground, capturing both the dignity of the man and the physical reality of his appearance. So what does this all mean? It means that the presidential look we associate with Washington, that stoic, firm, almost stern expression, might not have been entirely a reflection of his personality. It was, in part, a creative solution to a physical problem. It was a collaboration, intentional or not, between Washington's own dental suffering and the artist's need to create a heroic image. Think about it. The discomfort he felt, the way he had to hold his jaw, became intertwined with the artistic interpretation of strength and resolve. Artists weren't just painting a face. They were building a national symbol. Some chose to idealize him, exaggerating his jaw to make him look like a Roman god, a figure of immense power and nobility. Others chose a softer, more realistic path, showing the weariness and humanity of a man who had led a revolution and was now leading a country. The result is a fascinating gallery of different Washingtons. Each portrait tells us as much about the artist and the era's ideals as it does about the man himself. They were dealing with a real, physical issue, and their solutions helped shape the visual identity of the American presidency for centuries to come. The strong jaw, the determined look, these became a kind of visual shorthand for leadership. So the next time you pull a dollar bill out of your wallet, take a second look. You're not just seeing the first president of the United States. You're seeing the result of a portrait artist's challenge. You're seeing a story of pain, perseverance, and artistic interpretation, all captured in the subtle and often changing shape of George Washington's mouth. It's a reminder that history is often hidden in the details, and even our most enduring national symbols are far more complex and human than we might think. Thanks so much for watching and exploring this piece of history with me. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next chapter. We have so many more stories to uncover together. See you in the next video. Have you ever heard that George Washington had wooden teeth? It's one of those classic fun facts we all learn as kids. But what if I told you it's completely false? And what if I told you that this little lie and others like it are actually crucial to understanding America itself? Welcome to our deep dive into the myths that shaped a nation. Let's start with those infamous teeth. George Washington absolutely had dental problems. By the time he became president, he only had one natural tooth left. He wore several sets of dentures throughout his life, but none of them were made of wood. They were crafted from a variety of materials, including human teeth likely purchased from his enslaved workers, as well as ivory from hippos and elephants, and metal alloys like brass and gold. So where did the wooden teeth story come from? It's likely that the ivory he used became stained over time, giving it a grained, wood-like appearance. It's a simple misunderstanding, but one that stuck. But why did it stick? This is where it gets interesting. The image of the great general and president, a man who seemed almost godlike to his contemporaries, struggling with something as common and, frankly, as humbling as clunky wooden teeth, makes him more human. It makes him relatable. This isn't just a stoic figure on a dollar bill. He's a guy with a toothache. This humanizing effect is a powerful tool in nation building. Think about another famous Washington myth. I cannot tell a lie. I did it with my little hatchet. The story of a young George chopping down his father's cherry tree and immediately confessing is a powerful lesson in honesty. It was invented by an early biographer named Mason Locke Weems, or Parson Weems, shortly after Washington's death. Weems wasn't trying to be a historian. He was trying to create a moral exemplar for the young citizens of a new republic. He wanted to show that America's founder was virtuous from the very beginning. The story wasn't true, but it served a purpose. It helped to mold the character of a nation, embedding the value of honesty into the very identity of its founding father. These myths aren't limited to Washington. Let's talk about Paul Revere's Midnight Ride. The famous poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow paints a picture of a lone hero galloping through the night, screaming, "The British are coming," to awaken the colonial countryside. The reality was a bit more complex and, frankly, more of a team effort. Revere was one of several riders that night, part of an elaborate warning system. And he probably didn't shout, "The British are coming," since, at that point, most colonists still considered themselves British. He more likely whispered warnings about the regulars coming out. Longfellow, writing in 1860 on the eve of the Civil War, wasn't just recounting history. He was trying to inspire a sense of unity and heroic individualism, reminding a fracturing nation of the revolutionary spirit that had once bound them together. He transformed a group effort into the story of a single decisive hero. Then there's the legend of Betsy Ross sewing the first American flag. There's actually no credible historical evidence to support this claim. The story didn't even surface until nearly a century after the event supposedly took place, promoted by her own grandson. But why did this story become so beloved? It provides a female hero in a revolutionary narrative dominated by men. It gives a domestic, accessible origin to a powerful national symbol. The image of a seamstress in Philadelphia contributing to the birth of the nation is a powerful and inclusive one. It suggests that everyone, not just generals and politicians, had a role to play. The myth of Betsy Ross democratizes the revolution. So we have Washington's teeth making him relatable, the cherry tree making him virtuous, Paul Revere's ride making him a lone action hero, and Betsy Ross giving the revolution a female face. Each of these stories takes a historical figure and sands down the rough, complex edges of reality. They replace the messy truth with a simplified, more inspiring narrative. They transform historical figures into archetypes, into superheroes for a new nation. Why is this so important? Because a nation, especially a new one like the United States was, needs more than just laws and a constitution. It needs a shared story, it needs a mythology. These myths create a common cultural language and a set of shared values. They give people a sense of collective identity and purpose. They tell us who we are supposed to be, honest like Washington, brave like Revere, and resourceful like Ross. But there's a downside to this myth-making. When we turn historical figures into flawless paragons of virtue, we lose sight of their true complexity. George Washington was a brilliant general and leader, but he was also a slave owner. By focusing on the cherry tree, we can sometimes forget to grapple with the more difficult and contradictory aspects of his life and the society he helped build. When we oversimplify history into a collection of feel-good stories, we lose the valuable, and often difficult, lessons that the unvarnished truth can teach us. The myths make our heroes more approachable, but they also make them less real. They can obscure the very real struggles, compromises, and moral failings that are a part of any human story, and by extension, any national story. So, the next time you hear a fun fact about a historical hero, take a moment to ask yourself, is this story true? And if it's not, why do we tell it? What purpose does this myth serve? The answers can reveal as much about us and the nation we've built as they do about the historical figures themselves. The stories we choose to tell shape our identity, and understanding the line between history and myth is key to understanding who we truly are. The story of America isn't just written in history books. It's whispered in the legends and myths we've told ourselves for centuries. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through America's founding myths. It is a fascinating topic that shows how storytelling can be just as powerful as any army or law. If you enjoyed this video and want to explore more hidden histories, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which historical myth you find most interesting. See you next time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey through the untold stories of history. Today, in what we're calling Truth Beneath the Legend, we're going to peel back the layers of a very famous story, one you've probably heard since elementary school. It is a tale that has become so ingrained in our collective memory that we often accept it without a second thought. But as we so often find, the truth is not only different, but infinitely more fascinating. We're talking about George Washington, the first president of the United States, and his legendary wooden teeth. The image is almost cartoonish, isn't it? The stoic leader of a new nation, grimacing with a set of clunky, splintery wooden dentures. It's a story told to humanize a larger-than-life figure, to make him seem more rustic, more of the common man. It's a great fable, a piece of American folklore that has stood the test of time, but that's all it is, a fable. The reality is something else entirely, a story of incredible craftsmanship, immense personal struggle, and the surprising sophistication of 18th century dental technology. So let's get this out of the way right now. George Washington did not have wooden teeth, not a single pair. It's a complete myth, so where did this idea even come from? Well, some historians speculate that the ivory used in his dentures, over time, became stained and cracked, giving them a grained, wood-like appearance. Imagine ivory soaking up coffee, tea, and wine over the years. It wouldn't stay pristine white for long. This discoloration might have led to the simple, but incorrect, assumption that they were made of wood. It's an easy mistake to imagine someone making centuries later, but it obscures a much more complex and compelling narrative. The truth is that Washington suffered from dental problems his entire adult life. It was a constant source of pain and insecurity for him. He lost his first adult tooth in his early 20s, and by the time he was inaugurated as president in 1789, he had only one single natural tooth left in his mouth. Can you imagine the immense discomfort? This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It affected how he spoke, how he ate, and even the shape of his face. His letters are filled with complaints about aching gums, ill-fitting dentures, and the constant search for a solution. This was a very human struggle, one that plagued one of history's most powerful men. So if they weren't wood, what were they made of? Washington's dentures were marvels of 18th century innovation, handcrafted by some of the most skilled artisans of the day, including a man named Dr. John Greenwood. These weren't crude wooden blocks. They were sophisticated prosthetics. They were constructed from a combination of materials that sounds almost like a pirate's treasure chest. The base plates, designed to fit snugly against his gums, were carved from hippopotamus ivory. Yes, hippopotamus ivory. Into this base, a collection of other teeth were set. These included teeth from cows, horses, and most startlingly, human teeth. Now, the practice of using human teeth was unfortunately common at the time. These teeth were often purchased from other people, sometimes even from the deceased. In fact, Washington's account books show payments for teeth, though the exact source is often grimly unspecified. It's a somber reminder of the harsh realities of the era. The dentures were held together with gold wire springs and brass screws. It was a complex assembly of organic and metallic parts, a testament to the ingenuity of the time, but also a reflection of the desperate measures taken to solve a painful problem. Let's take a closer look at one of his surviving sets. The one he had during his inauguration was particularly special. Dr. Greenwood designed it with a hole to accommodate Washington's single remaining natural tooth. The idea was to use that tooth as an anchor to give the denture more stability. This detail alone shows the personalized, custom-made nature of these devices. They weren't off-the-shelf products. Each set was a unique creation, a collaboration between a patient in pain and a craftsman pushing the boundaries of what was possible. They were less a symbol of rustic simplicity and more a symbol of cutting-edge, albeit uncomfortable, technology. This constant dental battle had a profound impact on Washington's life and his presidency. The discomfort was often visible. Portraits from the period often show a man with a tightly clenched jaw and a strained expression. The bulky dentures pushed out his lips, changing the very structure of his face. His famous short-second inaugural address? Some historians suggest his discomfort might have been a contributing factor to its brevity. He was known to be self-conscious about how they affected his speech, making him reluctant to speak publicly at length. This wasn't a mythical, stoic hero, but a real person dealing with chronic pain and the insecurities that come with it. So, why does this matter? Why debunk the simple story of wooden teeth for this more complicated truth? Because the truth reveals so much more. It replaces a quaint, folksy myth with a powerful story of human fragility and perseverance. It shows us that even the greatest figures in history face relatable, human struggles. Washington wasn't just a general on a horse or a face on a dollar bill. He was a man who endured immense physical discomfort while leading a revolution and building a nation. His quest for functional teeth wasn't about vanity. It was about maintaining his ability to function, to lead, to simply live a normal life. The story of Washington's ivory and gold dentures is a story of innovation born from necessity. It highlights the incredible skill of craftsmen like Dr. Greenwood and the limitations of the medical science of their time. It's a raw, unflinching look at the physical toll of life in the 18th century, even for the wealthy and powerful. The truth isn't as clean or simple as the myth, but it gives us a far deeper appreciation for the man himself. It reminds us that behind every legend, there is a person, complete with their own pains, struggles, and incredible resilience. The truth isn't just more interesting than the fable. It's more human. Thank you so much for joining me today as we uncovered the truth beneath this particular legend. It is a great reminder to always question the stories we read told and to dig a little deeper for the real history. If you found this fascinating, please give this video a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next chapter. We have so many more myths to bust and truths to uncover together. Until next time, stay curious. Have you ever looked at a portrait of George Washington, that stoic, serious face on the dollar bill, and wondered what was behind that expression? Was it the weight of a new nation on his shoulders? The burden of leadership? Or was it something far more human? Today, we're peeling back the layers of history to uncover the story behind the smile that wasn't. The very real, and often painful saga of Washington's teeth. This isn't just a quirky historical footnote. It's a story about resilience, image, and the incredible strength it takes to lead when you're in constant discomfort. It's a tale that makes one of America's greatest heroes feel surprisingly and refreshingly real. Let's set the scene. Imagine being the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, the future first president, a man whose every word is scrutinized, whose every decision carries immense weight. Now, imagine doing all of that while suffering from chronic, debilitating tooth pain. This was George Washington's reality. His dental troubles weren't a minor inconvenience. They were a lifelong battle that began long before he became a household name. He lost his first adult tooth in his early 20s, and from then on, it was a steady decline. By the time he was inaugurated as president in 1789, he had only one single, solitary natural tooth left in his head. Think about that. The man leading a revolution, shaping a republic, could barely chew his food. This constant pain had a profound impact on his life. Letters to his dentists are filled with desperate pleas for relief, for adjustments to his ill-fitting dentures, and descriptions of the pain that plagued him. We often see Washington as this larger-than-life figure, a marble statue of a man. But these letters reveal a vulnerable side, a man grappling with a very common, very human ailment. It shaped his public persona too. The reserved, tight-lipped expression we see in his famous portraits, it wasn't just a sign of his serious nature. It was likely a conscious effort to keep his clumsy, uncomfortable dentures from slipping or clicking as he spoke. He was constantly aware of his appearance, worried that his dental issues would undermine his authority. Now, let's talk about the dentures themselves, because they are the stuff of legend and, frankly, a lot of myth. The most famous myth, of course, is that Washington had wooden teeth. It's a fun story, but it's completely false. In reality, his dentures were feats of 18th century engineering, though they were far from comfortable. His dentists, particularly a man named Dr. John Greenwood, crafted them from a variety of materials. We're talking about a base of carved hippopotamus ivory and gold, fitted with a collection of human teeth, and likely some cow and horse teeth as well. These weren't just objects. They were complex, spring-loaded contraptions designed to push against his cheeks and give his face a fuller, more natural appearance. The springs were necessary to keep them in place, but you can imagine how awkward and forceful that must have felt inside his mouth. They were heavy, they fit poorly, and they often caused his gums to become sore and inflamed. One particular set of dentures, crafted for his inauguration, was an intricate piece of work. Dr. Greenwood even designed it to fit around Washington's last remaining natural tooth, a lone bicuspid. There's a certain poignancy to that, isn't there? This great man holding on to one last piece of his original smile. Greenwood seemed to understand the sentimental value of this, writing to Washington. I would advise you to leave it as it is. It will be a guide for the new ones. It's a small personal detail that brings the entire struggle into sharp focus. Washington's desire for a normal appearance was so strong that he endured these contraptions, which were, by modern standards, instruments of torture. He was, in essence, curating his own image in real time, battling physical pain to project an aura of strength and stability for a nation that desperately needed it. So how did this affect his leadership? It's hard to say for sure, but we can speculate. The constant discomfort may have contributed to his famously reserved and stoic demeanor. When you're in pain, you tend to be more withdrawn, more serious. Some historians suggest that his reluctance to speak at length in public gatherings might have been partly due to the fear of his dentures failing him. It adds a fascinating layer to our understanding of his character. Was his famous restraint and dignity partly a coping mechanism for his physical suffering? It's entirely possible. It meant that every public address, every dinner party, every quiet conversation required an extra level of effort and control. He wasn't just leading a country. He was doing it while fighting a constant, private war inside his own mouth. This story also shines a light on the sheer grit of the man. It would have been easy to become bitter or to retreat from public life entirely. Many would have. But Washington didn't. He pushed through the pain day after day, year after year. He led an army to victory, presided over the Constitutional Convention, and served 2 terms as president, all while dealing with a condition that would have sidelined lesser men. It speaks volumes about his character, his sense of duty, and his unwavering commitment to the American experiment. His perseverance in the face of this personal hardship is, in its own way, as inspiring as his military victories or his political achievements. It shows a strength that wasn't just political or strategic, but deeply personal and internal. And so, we arrive at the end of our story, looking at those famous portraits in a new light. We see not just a founding father, but a human being. The tight-lipped expression is no longer just a sign of solemnity, but a symbol of hidden endurance. The slightly puffy cheeks aren't just an artist's rendering, but the result of bulky, uncomfortable dental work. Washington's legacy, we realize, was never about having a perfect smile. It wasn't built on a flawless, polished image. It was forged in the fires of revolution and built on a foundation of incredible personal strength, character, and resolve. His dentures, now preserved in museums, are more than just historical artifacts. They are powerful reminders that our heroes are human. They had flaws, they felt pain, and they struggled with insecurities, just like the rest of us. They remind us that the polished portraits of history often hide uncomfortable truths and private battles. Washington's story teaches us that true strength isn't about the absence of weakness or pain. It's about how we lead, how we endure, and how we carry ourselves with dignity, even when we're hurting. The smile that endured wasn't the one on his face. It was the enduring spirit of a man who gave everything for his country, right down to his very last tooth. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into a lesser-known corner of American history. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the past. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, stay curious,